Dr. Vickers will lead off the closing statements for the Socialists.
Peter, I wasn't aware that this was going to come into a debate as to who owns philosophy. I'm willing to concede some share, but I'm not going to hand in my philosopher's badge just yet. Philos, philosophy, desire, a love of the truth. Truth, it seems to me, does not just exist, as you have been told, in the idea or the written word or the book titles that can be dropped. I also believe very strongly that by your deeds shall you be known. It seems to me it's important to look rather closely at the deeds of social democracy as they have been implemented here and there in bits and pieces in this country in this century. It seems to me that that has a truth that we should be pursuing every bit as much as my opponent's desire to define my philosophy for me. I believe in reason, but I believe in emotion too, and I'm not afraid to say that I think that human beings who believe only in reason should not be entrusted with the running of governments or the teaching of students. I don't believe that altruism is only to be defined in these terms of self-sacrifice, but I do believe in self-sacrifice. Not as an exclusive virtue. I certainly don't go around day in, day out saying, how can I self-sacrifice next? I'm very much an old Aristotelian. In that I share a great deal with Leonard Peikoff. I don't accept Aristotle's... I don't accept his defense of slavery, Aristotle's that is. I don't accept some of his social programs, but I certainly accept his belief in moderation. All things in moderation, and that of course also includes self-sacrifice. I defined what I consider social democracy to be, and a great deal of that definition came out of my experience in this country with those small experiments we have proceeded with. And it seems to me that this is a false dichotomy. Self-sacrifice, altruism, selfishness. I tried to say that at the beginning in talking about relative morality, because that is what we are talking about. I know that a lot of people would like there to be absolutes written up there in the sky, written up there on stone, but there are not. There are values that we can reason about with one another. And for me, the chief value about which we must reason is how much self-interest we can be expected to be allowed to assert. And I'm a self-asserting person. Most feminists are. And how much commitment to others, how much responsibility for others we should expect ourselves to give. I say expect ourselves. I have never felt coerced by my government in the context of providing for others. Nor do I just leave it to tax day, nor do most of you. Canadians are among the most generous people in the world. And indeed, that is probably why it has been possible in this country to get away from the stereotype dichotomies and to see how much, as generous Canadians, we are willing to give to others. And sometimes we say to ourselves, we went a little too far there. Okay? Maybe we better pull it back here, and maybe university students ought to pay a bit more for their education and the taxpayers a little less. And we have been able, within the rubric of a social consensus that exists in this country, and I believe it despite some of the things I've heard this evening, to balance, to say, yeah, we want to get as much as we can, we want to assert ourselves, but we believe we are members of a community, and as members of a community, we will spend some time and some property and some of our fabric and some of our energy and some of our love on those people around us.
want to go back to the challenge from Professors Ridpath and Peikoff. I want to talk about the logic, the implications of their rhetoric, their positions on individual liberty and the defense of property and laissez-faire. I have a quotation, if you bear with me. Their leaders do not believe in unions or in welfare economics or in suffrage. Their basic premise is that government exists to protect the entrepreneur from undesirable interference by other actors so that the accumulation of capital can proceed without restraint. Not so far, I think, from some of the comments that the other side have made or written elsewhere. It happens to be about the government of El Salvador, and it happens to be a new book out of the University of North Carolina. It was said earlier that El Salvador and Central America are not part of our debate tonight. Forgive me. My socialism can go that far, and what Ronald Reagan does there is part of my socialism. In El Salvador, a reactionary military clique dependent on the United States for its survival tortures and kills at least 100 citizens each week in order to create a climate of fear in which it can stay in power. This gang shares its power with 14 of the richest families in El Salvador, who own all there is in that country, together with American business interests, and together they've reduced the majority of people in that poor country to a subhuman existence. The United States, President Reagan, in the names of all that he believes in, non-interference in other countries, laissez-faire, individual liberty, and the concern for human beings, sends arms and advisors to these thugs in the name of those freedoms, and shares in the murder of those who are rebelling against such unimaginable brutality and suppression that they obviously must be surrogates of the Soviet imperialist power. When you read... Each time I read another unimaginably horrible story of a piece of torture of some poor peasant in El Salvador or in Guatemala, you forgive me, I am, Buster. Whenever you talk about it, what you're talking about is the logic, the inexorable logic of the philosophy that the large-scale right espouses, the philosophy that says somehow liberty is found in property rights, and the rights of capital take precedence over those of humanity, and that selfishness, however sophistically defined, is morally superior to a humanist egalitarian ethic. We reject it. I have two final quotes, if you will forgive me. One is from a hero of mine who I mentioned earlier, David Lewis, the prophet of Canadian socialism. The modern democratic socialist, David Lewis wrote in 1956, should proclaim his aims loudly and passionately, as I hope we're doing tonight. The equality of man and woman is the socialist watchword. The moral struggle against injustice and inequality is the socialist duty. To be a strong and powerful voice for the common man against the abuse and oppression of a privileged minority is the socialist function. And to forge an ever finer and ever higher standard of values and a richer pattern of life and behavior is the socialist dream. I want to say it in less highfalutin terms. I met last year in the Yukon a great old woman who happened to die last week. She was 92 years old. Her name was Hilda Hellenby. She spent all her life in the North working with native peoples, working for feminist rights, working in that strange world for a socialist dream that she had. Hilda Hellenby used to say she wasn't as good on the philosophy of reason as our colleagues. She didn't talk as they do about Kant and Plato and Bergson and Heraclitus. She wasn't good at that, but she was good at saying things. And what Hilda Hellenby said, and I heard her, she said, you know why I do it? When in doubt, take the losing side. The winners don't need us. They're doing fine. That's all that socialism has ever meant. That's what it's all about. It's the basis... It's the basis of a creed that is noble, of a dream that is warm and glorious, and it is as true to the bright side of the human soul as man and women have ever invented. I take it that I cannot enjoin a certain number of you in this room to share that dream with us tonight, but some I believe you will, and I hope you do. Thank you very much.